She thought she could have it all, her affair, her secrets, and still have me waiting for her at the end of the day. But I wasn't the fool she thought I was. What started as a betrayal soon became a game of chess, and every move I made was one step closer to showing her just how high the price of her deceit would be. It started like any normal day, just me, the hustle of work, and the comfort of my family around me. Lisa and I had been together for years, built a life that, on the surface, seemed perfect. We had our quirks, sure, but nothing that felt like it could tear us apart. I'd come home every day to her smile, the sound of our kids running around the house, and the routine that made everything feel safe. I thought I was happy, thought I was enough. And I believed she did, too. But, as the saying goes, things are never as they seem. It all started with a conversation, one that was supposed to be simple. One night, after dinner, Lisa casually dropped a bombshell: she was going to be her sister Sarah's surrogate. Now, I'm no stranger to surprises, but this one caught me off guard. She had already taken steps, spoken to the clinic, and made arrangements, all without discussing it with me first. I was stunned. My thoughts raced. "Wait, you're going to carry another man's child?" I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. Her response was cold, practical, almost detached. "It's Sarah's baby, not mine. I'm just the carrier." There was no room for me in that decision, no consideration for how I might feel. The worst part? She didn't even apologize for blindsiding me. She didn't care that she had just shattered the fragile trust we'd built. Instead, she went on, defending her choice, citing her sister's infertility struggles. It was as though my feelings didn't matter at all. "I'm doing this for Sarah," she said. "If you loved me, you'd understand." I couldn't believe it. The woman I'd shared everything with was standing in front of me, telling me that our partnership didn't matter anymore. That she could make life-altering decisions without even bothering to consult me. The air in the room grew thick, and I could feel my blood boiling. I tried to keep it together, but every word she spoke chipped away at something inside me. She wasn't asking for my support, she was demanding it. And when I hesitated, when I tried to express how hurt I was, she shut me down. "You're being dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. That was the moment everything changed. It wasn't about surrogacy. It was about respect. I wasn't just her husband, I was an afterthought, a second-class citizen in a marriage I thought was built on mutual love and trust. I stayed silent for the rest of the night. But inside, I was seething. I had no idea how deep her disregard for me ran, how far she would go to prove that she didn't need me. The seed of betrayal had been planted, and I knew it was only a matter of time before I would have to confront it. But I wasn't just going to roll over and let this happen. No, I had plans. And when the time was right, I would make her regret ever crossing me. That night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I made a promise to myself. I would not let this slide. I would make her see the consequences of her actions, not through anger, not through violence, but through a quiet, strategic revenge that would leave her questioning everything. The first step was simple: I would wait for the right moment. And I would be patient. After all, revenge is a dish best served cold. A week had passed since the conversation with Lisa, and every day felt like I was walking on eggshells. The tension in the house was unbearable. It wasn't that we were fighting, it was the cold, silent distance that now defined our relationship. She was still carrying on with her surrogacy plans, talking about doctor's appointments and injections like everything was normal. But nothing was normal. Not anymore. I could sense the shift in her, a change I hadn't seen before. She was still physically there, but emotionally? She was miles away, absorbed in this mission she had decided was more important than our marriage. And I was supposed to sit back and play along. But I wasn't the type of man to be ignored or sidelined. That's where my plan began. First, I started by taking control of our finances. I had always handled the bills, the transfers, and the savings accounts. Lisa trusted me with that, and I had kept everything running smoothly, until now. The moment I saw how she had gone behind my back with her surrogacy plans, it hit me like a punch to the gut. She didn't trust me enough to consult me, but she trusted me to keep our financial life intact. That was going to change. I opened my laptop that night, after the kids were in bed, and logged into our joint accounts. I had always kept a tight grip on our financial situation, but this time, I wasn't just paying bills. I was making sure that Lisa couldn't continue with her plans unchecked. Slowly, methodically, I canceled all the automatic transfers she had set up for the surrogacy clinic, including the payments for the fertility treatments. I made sure the clinic would receive a nice, big surprise when they tried to process the next payment, an error message. The funds weren't there. I also froze any accounts tied directly to her projects. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, it wasn't as though I was sabotaging anything major, right? I wasn't taking her money or selling off assets. I was simply pulling the plug on something that had nothing to do with me. I knew Lisa had been working hard to save money for the surrogacy, and I was sure she wouldn't take kindly to my interference. But what she didn't realize was that I was playing a long game. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. The next day, when she tried to make a routine payment to the clinic, her card was declined. And the following day, she received an email from the clinic saying that their payments were overdue. She called me immediately, her voice shaking with anger. "What the hell did you do?" she demanded. I didn't flinch. "What are you talking about?" I said, playing innocent. "Maybe there's a problem with the account. Have you called the bank?" I did. "And they said everything was fine on their end," she snapped, her frustration growing. "Why can't I make the payment?" "You've done something." "This is exactly what I was worried about." "Calm down," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I'm sure it's a mistake. I'll look into it tomorrow." And I hung up. I wasn't worried. I knew that the damage was done. She would need to scramble now, to find a way to make the payments, to explain to the clinic why she couldn't send them the money. And I wasn't going to make it easy for her. In the back of my mind, I had already started formulating the next move. Over the next few days, Lisa's panic was palpable. She tried everything, calling the bank, calling the clinic, even asking her sister Sarah for help. She couldn't understand why things weren't working. Her calls to me grew more frantic, more desperate. But each time, I remained cool, calm, and collected. I was no longer the man who had been blindsided by her decisions. I was the man in control, the man who could make her regret the way she had treated me. One afternoon, she came to me with a look of pure frustration. "Grant, I need to talk to you. What's going on with our accounts? Why won't the payments go through?" she demanded, standing in front of me with her arms crossed. I raised an eyebrow and gave her a small, nonchalant shrug. "I told you, I'll look into it. But maybe you should have asked me before you started making these big decisions." Her eyes narrowed as she processed what I was saying. "What do you mean by that?" I leaned back in my chair, my fingers steepled in front of me. "You made a decision without consulting me, Lisa. I had no say in this. I'm not going to just sit by while you go ahead with something that affects both of us. Maybe you should have considered that before you signed up for all this." The words hit her like a slap in the face. For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt cross her face, quick, fleeting, but it was there. She wasn't used to me challenging her, especially not like this. And as much as I wanted to savor the moment, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. She had chosen her path, but now she would have to face the consequences of it. The financial control was my first victory, and Lisa's panic was the proof that I had struck a nerve. What I didn't expect, however, was that this would only be the beginning. The more I pulled the strings, the more I realized just how much Lisa had underestimated me. She had thought she could do whatever she wanted without consulting me, without considering me. Now, it was time for me to remind her of who was really in control. As I sat there, watching her leave the room in frustration, I knew something bigger was coming. I had her where I wanted her. And now, it was time to turn the tables completely. Lisa was visibly unraveling, and I could see the cracks forming. The surprise that had initially been a seed of betrayal in my chest was now blossoming into something deeper. She didn't know it yet, but her actions had set off a chain of events that would take her to a place of total vulnerability. She thought she was in control, that by making her decisions alone, she could push me aside and continue with her plans. But what she didn't know was that I had been quietly preparing the stage for a much larger play. As I watched her struggle to make sense of her sudden financial setbacks, I kept a careful distance. I played the role of the concerned, calm husband. Each day, she would ask questions that I carefully sidestepped or deflected with vague assurances. But inside, I was already working on the next phase of my plan. I wasn't interested in emotional outbursts or petty arguments anymore. This was far bigger than that. I was going to make sure that she learned the consequences of treating me like a second-class citizen in my own marriage. But first, I needed more ammunition. That's where my old friend Carter came in. Carter was someone who knew how to dig into people's lives, someone who thrived in uncovering secrets that people wanted to keep buried. I had called him a few days earlier, asking for his help. I told him I wanted to know everything about Lisa's new business partner, the wealthy businessman who had been hovering around her recently. The one who had wormed his way into her life so effortlessly, so naturally. Lisa had been spending more time with this guy, and her excuses for their meetings were starting to get flimsy. He was a so-called investor in the surrogacy clinic, she told me. But I had my doubts. Something about their relationship felt off, and I wasn't the type to let things slide anymore. If there was a betrayal at play, I was going to find it. Carter worked quickly, as he always did. Within a few days, he had a file on Lisa's new friend that made my blood boil. His name was Gregory Williams, a charming, slick businessman with a portfolio that made him seem untouchable. He had invested heavily in the surrogacy clinic, and apparently, he and Lisa had become quite close over the past few months. The file Carter handed me wasn't just about his business dealings, though. It contained something far juicier, evidence of Gregory's attempts to seduce Lisa, subtle but undeniable flirtations, and even some suggestive emails that, when pieced together, painted a very clear picture of what was going on. I could feel the heat rising in my chest as I sifted through the documents. She had been meeting him behind my back, slipping into a world where I didn't exist, where she could be someone else entirely. The worst part? She hadn't even thought to mention him to me. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung, it was the sheer audacity. She thought she could keep this hidden from me, but I was never one to be kept in the dark for long. I let the documents sit for a few hours before I made the decision to confront her. This wasn't about making a scene or venting my frustration. This was about sending a message, about showing her that I wasn't just some fool who could be left in the dark while she pursued her own happiness. I had played my part for too long, walking the line of tolerance and patience. Now, it was my turn to set the terms. When she came home that evening, I knew she was already on edge. The frustration of dealing with the surrogacy clinic's payment problems had clearly taken its toll. She walked in, her face flushed, her eyes sharp with the kind of frustration that only comes from realizing things aren't going your way. She didn't say anything as she dropped her purse on the counter and went into the kitchen. I waited for the moment to strike, watching her silently from the living room. She hadn't even noticed the folder I'd placed on the table, the one that held her fate. Finally, she turned around, her eyes meeting mine. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tense. It wasn't a question, it was a command. She could already feel the tension in the air, the shift in the atmosphere. She just didn't know what was coming. "I think you're right," I replied coolly, my voice calm and steady. We do need to talk. She raised an eyebrow, her arms folding defensively. What's this about now, Grant? I stood up and slowly walked over to the table, picking up the folder and placing it in front of her. This, I said, watching her face carefully as I slid the folder toward her. This is about your little business partner, Gregory Williams. Lisa's face paled as she looked at the folder. She didn't reach for it immediately, but her eyes flicked between me and the documents inside, her mind racing to figure out how I knew. You've been meeting with him, haven't you? I asked, my tone unchanging. How long has this been going on, Lisa? Her lips trembled slightly, and I could see the panic creeping into her eyes. What do you mean? She said, her voice shaking. I don't know what you're talking about. I gave her a flat, unimpressed look. You don't have to pretend anymore. I know everything. She finally reached for the folder, flipping it open and scanning the contents. Her eyes widened as she saw the emails, the notes, and the photos. She didn't speak, didn't defend herself. She just stared at the evidence, her face a mixture of guilt and shock. I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. I knew something was off. You thought you could keep this from me, that I wouldn't notice. But I'm not stupid, Lisa. You think you can betray me, lie to my face, and I just keep going along with it? I shook my head, the disappointment heavy in my voice. I never wanted to hurt you, Grant, she said, her voice a whisper now. She didn't look at me, her eyes still locked on the papers in front of her. I don't know. I felt like I needed something more. I nodded slowly. I get it. You needed something more. But the way you went about it? You didn't just betray me, Lisa. You betrayed everything we built together. Her face crumpled, the tears finally coming. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to tell you. I let the silence hang for a moment before I responded. You didn't have to fix anything, Lisa. You just had to be honest with me. But you couldn't do that, could you? Her shoulders slumped in defeat, and I could see that the woman who had once been my partner, the one I had loved and trusted, was now nothing more than a shadow of herself. I had her where I wanted her, and for the first time, I felt a strange sense of power. This was my revenge, not through anger, but through cold, calculated strategy. The game was just beginning, and I was in control now. The air in the house was thick with the weight of our confrontation, and Lisa's guilt seemed to hang in the room like a dark cloud. Her tears were genuine, but they didn't move me, not this time. I had spent too many years swallowing my feelings, too many years putting her needs before my own. Now, I was done being the understanding husband who forgave all her little transgressions, who allowed her to get away with things without ever facing consequences. I don't want to hear your apologies, Lisa, I said flatly, my voice colder than I had intended. I want to see action. I want you to understand what you've done, and I want you to feel it. Her tear-filled eyes locked onto mine, searching for any hint of softness, any hint that I would relent. But there was none. There couldn't be. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore, this was about teaching her the price of the trust she had so carelessly shattered. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her expression faltering. I never meant to hurt you, Grant. You have to believe me, she pleaded, her voice cracking. You didn't mean to hurt me? I echoed. I gave a bitter laugh. That's exactly the problem. You never thought about me at all. You just went ahead and did whatever you wanted. Without a second thought about how it would affect me, our family, or this marriage. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to silence her. No, Lisa. You made your choice. And now, you're going to learn what it means to make a choice without thinking it through. The calmness of my words must have cut deeper than any rage-filled outburst. I saw the realization hit her, and it was like watching someone wake up from a long, blissful sleep into a cold, harsh reality. Her shoulders hunched as if trying to shield herself from the truth of it all. "Please," she whispered, almost pleading now. "Grant, don't do this. I'll fix it. I'll make it right. I'll cut ties with him. I promise. Just give me a chance." I stared at her, watching her break in front of me, and for the first time, I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. Sympathy was for people who weren't aware of the hurt they'd caused. Sympathy was for the person who regretted what they'd done. But Lisa wasn't that person. She wasn't truly sorry. She was just afraid of losing her comfortable life, of losing me. That was the only reason she was desperate now. "I'm done listening to promises," I said, my voice even but unyielding. "You had your chance to be honest with me. You had your chance to choose this family over whatever it is you think you need. But you didn't. Now, the only thing left is for you to face the consequences." Her face paled, and she took a step back, almost as though she were physically recoiling from my words. "What are you going to do, Grant?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me?" I looked at her, and for a moment, I saw the woman I had once loved, the woman who had been my partner. But that version of her was gone. This woman, the one standing in front of me now, was someone I didn't recognize. She had betrayed me, manipulated me, and thought she could get away with it all without facing the fallout. "I want you to understand what you've done. I want you to feel the weight of your choices," I said, my voice growing firmer. "And you're going to feel it in the only way that matters now, through the consequences." I had made up my mind. Lisa was going to experience what it meant to betray me, not just emotionally, but in the most practical way possible. It wasn't going to be enough for her to simply cut ties with Gregory, to apologize and act like nothing had happened. No, the price she was going to pay was much higher than that. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind already made up. I didn't need to waste any more time or energy on emotional games. I was playing the long game, and I had my next move planned out. Lisa had crossed a line, and now it was time to make sure she understood exactly what it meant to break the trust of someone who had loved her unconditionally for years. I made a few calls, contacted my lawyer, and arranged for the papers to be drawn up. This wasn't going to be a simple separation. This wasn't going to be the kind of divorce where we split our things and moved on. No, this was going to be a full, legal battle, one where I took everything she valued and left her to pick up the pieces. By the time Lisa realized what was happening, it would be too late. I wasn't just going to take her to the cleaners in the divorce settlement. I was going to expose her for the liar and manipulator she had become. I was going to make sure that the world saw her for who she truly was. Every little detail of her deceit would be laid bare. When I sat down at the kitchen table, papers spread in front of me, Lisa walked in, still looking bleary-eyed and disheveled from sleep. Her face fell when she saw the papers, the realization hitting her like a ton of bricks. "Grant," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What are you doing?" I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "You don't get to make decisions without me anymore, Lisa. You don't get to betray me and think there will be no consequences. I'm taking control of my life back. Starting right now." She took a step back, as though she had been slapped. You can't do this. We can work this out. We can." "I'm done working things out, Lisa. I've tried. I've put up with your lies, your manipulations, your secrecy. But no more. Now, you'll face the consequences of what you've done." Her face twisted with anger, but beneath that, I saw the fear of losing everything. And that was exactly what was going to happen. She had underestimated me. And now, she was going to see how far I was willing to go. As she stood there, frozen, trying to come to grips with what was happening, I stood up and walked out of the room. This was no longer about trying to fix things. This was about making her pay for the betrayal. And I was going to make sure she did. I had spent years building this life, and it was time to take it back. It was a strange kind of silence that enveloped the house after I served Lisa with the papers. She hadn't said a word since, only watching me with wide eyes as if she were waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. The decision was final. This wasn't about me being angry anymore, this was about me regaining control over a life I had almost lost. As the days passed, the weight of what was happening began to settle in for both of us. I could see the shift in Lisa. The woman who once walked through this house with her head high, confident in her choices, was now reduced to a shadow of that person. She hovered in the background, often retreating to her room or leaving for hours on end to clear her head. But no amount of time or space would make the situation disappear. She knew the walls were closing in, and the pressure was building with every passing hour. I could feel the shifts, too. The tension had reached its peak, and I began to relish the control I now had. This wasn't just about the legal battle, I was rewriting the narrative of our relationship. For so long, I had been the one to forgive, the one to try to heal the cracks she had created in our marriage. But now, she was the one who had to face the consequences of her choices, and I was going to make sure that she would never forget it. At night, I would lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. I wasn't someone who could easily let go of past wrongs, and I had no intention of doing so now. The hurt, the betrayal, it all weighed on me, and I was determined to make sure Lisa would understand what it was like to be on the receiving end of the pain she had caused. But as much as the emotional toll was heavy, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the control was finally mine. She had thought she could leave me in the dark, that she could go behind my back and make these decisions without consulting me. But now, I was holding all the cards, and it felt damn good. The next phase of my plan was already in motion. I had already contacted the lawyer, set up the paperwork, and even planned for the public exposure of Lisa's infidelity with Gregory. It wasn't just about money or property anymore, it was about taking everything from her, making sure she would have to rebuild her life from scratch, just as I had been forced to do when she first betrayed me. But the thing about revenge, especially the kind I was planning, is that it isn't immediate. It's calculated, slow, and methodical. I didn't need to see her squirm right away. In fact, the longer it took for her to realize the full extent of what I was doing, the sweeter the revenge would be. I wasn't just going to leave her with a financial blow, I was going to take everything she held dear and turn it all against her. I didn't just want her to regret her decisions, I wanted her to learn what it feels like to lose it all, the same way she had almost made me lose everything. So, while she continued to stew in her guilt and confusion, I worked in silence. I had already secured the final piece of my plan, I was going to expose her to everyone. Her friends. Her family. Gregory. And the people who thought they knew her. It was time for them to see the woman she truly was. I spent the next few days digging through her social media, compiling evidence of her meetings with Gregory, and gathering details on the way she had used her work trips as cover for their growing relationship. I wasn't just going to let her hide behind apologies and promises. I was going to make sure that when the truth came out, it would hit like a tidal wave, taking her down in front of everyone. But the hardest part wasn't the legal strategy or gathering the evidence. The hardest part was the silence between Lisa and me. There were no more shared glances, no more quiet moments together, no more comfort. We had gone from a family to two strangers sharing a house. Every interaction now was tinged with the weight of what was happening. She didn't ask me how I was doing. She didn't try to engage me in conversation about the kids or our future. She just waited, and I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of what I would do next. It was on the fourth day after I served her with the papers that she tried to make a move. She approached me in the kitchen, her face pale and weary, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. "Grant," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to talk. This can't be the end of us." I didn't look up from the sink as I washed the dishes, my mind focused on the task at hand. I wasn't interested in hearing her plead anymore. "What is there to talk about, Lisa?" I said, my voice calm but firm. "You made your choice. And now you're going to face the consequences of that choice." She stepped closer, her voice cracking. "Grant, I don't want to lose you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I made a mistake." I finally turned to face her, my expression unreadable. "You made a lot of mistakes, Lisa. But I'm done cleaning up after them. You're going to have to figure this one out on your own." Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't move. I wasn't going to be moved by the tears or the guilt anymore. She had made this mess, and now it was hers to clean up. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, taking a step back. "Please. I just want to fix this." I met her gaze and let the silence stretch between us. Finally, I spoke, my words cutting through the tension like a knife. "You can't fix this, Lisa. You've already broken everything. And now, you're going to feel it. All of it." As I walked away, I could hear her sobbing quietly behind me, but I didn't look back. She didn't deserve my sympathy. She didn't deserve my forgiveness. She had chosen this path, and now, she would have to live with the fallout. And as much as it hurt me to see her like that, I knew one thing for sure: she would never underestimate me again. The game was in full swing now, and I was determined to make her regret everything she had done. Every move I made, every decision I took, was a step closer to making sure she realized the cost of her betrayal. And when the walls finally closed in, she would know exactly who had built them. Lisa had tried her best to pretend everything was fine, but I could see through the cracks. She wasn't fooling anyone, least of all me. The guilt had started to eat at her, and she was drowning in it. But no matter how many tears she shed, no matter how many apologies she threw my way, the truth was that the damage had already been done. Her betrayal was not something that could be undone with a few heartfelt words. The tension in the house grew unbearable as the days passed. Lisa was no longer the woman I had married. She was a shell of that person, haunted by her own actions, desperately trying to find a way back into my good graces. But I wasn't interested in forgiveness anymore. She had crossed a line, and there was no coming back from that. Not for her, not for me. She spent the next few days trying to fix things, trying to make amends for what she had done, but it was too little, too late. Her gestures were empty, her words hollow. She cleaned the house, tried to cook my favorite meals, and even took on extra responsibilities with the kids, as though she could distract me from the betrayal she had so casually handed me. But I wasn't distracted. I wasn't interested in the facade she was trying to build. I had already made up my mind, and nothing she did would change that. One night, after dinner, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table, her hands nervously twisting the napkin in her lap. "Grant, I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what you said," she started, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt you, and I can't take that back. But I want to make things right. I want us to fix this." I set my fork down, meeting her gaze. "Fix it? How, Lisa? You can't fix something like this. You've already shown me exactly who you are. And who you are isn't the person I thought I was married to." She looked down at her hands, her shoulders sagging under the weight of my words. "I never meant to hurt you. You have to believe me. I was lost, Grant. I thought I needed something more, but I didn't. I should have talked to you first. I should have trusted you. But I was so caught up in everything." I let her words hang in the air for a moment. "You were lost?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Lisa, you weren't lost. You were selfish. You decided, without telling me, that my feelings didn't matter. You made a decision that affected both of us, and you did it behind my back. And now, you want me to just forget all of that because you're sorry?" Her eyes welled up with tears, but this time, I didn't feel the familiar pang of sympathy. She wasn't the woman I had loved anymore. She was someone else, someone I couldn't trust, someone who had let her own desires blind her to the life we had built together. "No, I'm not going to forget it," I said quietly, my gaze hardening. "But I'm going to make sure you understand the consequences. I'm done playing nice, Lisa. You crossed a line, and now you're going to learn that actions have consequences. I'm taking control of my life again, and you're going to feel it." She didn't say anything else after that. She just sat there, looking defeated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for something to hold on to. But there was nothing left for her to cling to. She had burned every bridge, destroyed every shred of trust. And now, it was time for her to face the fallout. The next day, the first real crack in her world began to show. She came to me, her face pale and her voice shaky. "Grant, I need to talk to you," she said, her words barely above a whisper. "The clinic called. They said they're canceling the surrogacy. They're not going to work with me anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" I said, leaning back in my chair. "What a shame." She looked at me, confusion and panic written all over her face. But I didn't do anything. I was just trying to help Sarah, to do something good. This wasn't about me. It was about family. How could they do this to me? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let her words hang in the air, and for a moment, I allowed myself to enjoy the satisfaction that came with watching her struggle. I had been the one left in the dark, blindsided by her choices, and now, the tables had turned. Now, she was the one who had to face the consequences. Finally, I spoke, my voice cold. "Maybe it's because they saw what I saw, Lisa. You made a decision without thinking, without consulting anyone, and now you're facing the fallout. Your actions have consequences." She looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You did this, didn't you?" she whispered. "You told them to cancel the surrogacy." I didn't flinch. "I didn't have to tell them anything, Lisa. Your actions spoke for themselves." She took a step back, her face a mixture of shock and anger. "You're really going to do this? You're really going to ruin my life like this? After everything I've done for this family?" I stood up, walking toward her. "I didn't ruin your life, Lisa. You did that all on your own. You made your choice, and now you're going to live with it." The realization hit her like a freight train. She stood there, staring at me as though she couldn't believe what was happening. But this was the price of betrayal, the price of thinking you could make decisions without considering the person who had been standing beside you for years. And as the weight of that realization sunk in, I knew that this was just the beginning. I had many more moves to make, but watching her crumble under the consequences of her actions was the first victory. I left her standing there, broken, while I moved on with my plan. The walls were closing in on her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The truth was coming, and I was going to make sure it hit her harder than she could ever imagine. Lisa's world was unraveling faster than she could stitch it back together. I had no sympathy left for her, her actions had been calculated, and now, she was reaping what she had sown. But the best part of this whole situation? I was still in control, and she had no idea just how deep I was digging into her lies. It wasn't just the surrogacy clinic that was falling apart for her. No, I had much bigger plans in motion, and the first of those plans was about to take effect. The people in her life, the people who thought they knew her, were about to be shown who she really was. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect. One evening, just as Lisa was trying to make her rounds in the kitchen, trying to act like nothing had changed, I received an email. It was from the private investigator I had hired, the one who had been digging into Gregory Williams, the businessman she had been seeing behind my back. The email contained everything: the hidden meetings, the romantic dinners at upscale restaurants, and, most damning of all, the hotel bills, 2 rooms, with one always booked under a false name. Gregory had been a presence in her life that was far more than professional, and now, I had the evidence to prove it. I let the email sit open on my phone for a while, savoring the moment. The truth was finally here, and it was going to be the nail in the coffin for Lisa. She had been living in her bubble, thinking I was blind to her deceit, thinking I couldn't see what she was doing. But I wasn't blind. I was patient, and now, the truth was coming out. I sat down in the living room, letting the silence between us stretch longer than usual. Lisa walked in, trying her best to keep the mood light, her voice overly cheery. "Hey, I was thinking we could." I didn't even let her finish. I held up my phone, the screen glowing with the evidence I had collected. "You know, Lisa, I've been doing a little digging myself. I just got this email. It's got some interesting information. Did you know that Gregory Williams, the guy you've been spending so much time with, has been pretty cozy with you on business trips?" Lisa froze, her eyes going wide. She looked from my phone to my face, and for the first time in a long while, I saw panic in her eyes. What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice trembling. I slid my finger across the screen, showing her the evidence, piece by piece. The hotel bookings, the dinners, the receipts. I could almost see the color draining from her face as she absorbed what was happening. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel the weight of every word, every moment of this betrayal, sinking in. "You thought you could hide this from me, didn't you?" I said, my voice flat. "You thought I wouldn't find out about you and Gregory. But I'm not an idiot, Lisa. I've known all along. And now, everyone's going to know." Her breathing quickened, and I could see her trying to process the situation, trying to come up with some excuse, some lie to throw at me. But there was nothing left to say. The truth was out, and it was too late for her to backpedal now. "Grant, please don't do this," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't." "Save it," I interrupted, cutting her off. "I'm done listening to your excuses. You made your choice, Lisa. And now, you're going to face the consequences." I stood up slowly, walking toward her. She took a step back, but I didn't stop. I wasn't afraid of her or her tears. I had already made up my mind, and now, it was time to carry out the final act. "You're going to lose everything, Lisa," I said softly. "Your reputation, your image, your friends, all of it. I've already started the process. I've contacted Gregory's wife, his business partners, and I've even sent the files to a few of your close friends. They'll know exactly who you are by the time the week is over." Her face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, her hands trembling. You can't do this to me. Please, don't do this. I'll do anything. I'll fix it. Just don't expose me." I looked at her, my eyes cold. "You had a chance to fix things, Lisa. You had a chance to be honest with me, to put this family first. But you didn't. You chose him. And now, you'll pay the price for it." I turned and walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, I glanced back one last time, savoring the sight of her sitting there, broken. She had made this mess. And now, it was mine to clean up, on my terms, not hers. "I hope you understand what's coming," I said, my voice hard. "Because once this hits, there's no coming back from it." And with that, I left. I knew what was next. Lisa would try to salvage her life, try to patch things up with Gregory or beg for forgiveness from her friends. But none of it would work. She had crossed a line, and I was the one who was going to make sure she understood the true cost of betrayal. The truth had been exposed, and it was going to destroy everything she thought she could control. And the best part? She had no idea just how much worse it was going to get. I had only just begun. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, emails, and texts, each one more damning than the last. It was like watching an old building crumble, slowly at first, but then with an unstoppable force. Lisa had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. The emails I'd sent, the conversations I'd had, the damage I'd meticulously planned, it was all falling into place. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. Lisa tried to reach out, of course. She called. She texted. She begged. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She had made her bed, and now it was time for her to lie in it. I was done listening to her apologies, her excuses, and her feigned remorse. There was nothing left for her to say that would make any difference. She had crossed a line, and the repercussions were now fully set in motion. The first call came from her sister Sarah. She didn't waste time, she was already upset, demanding to know why Lisa had been exposed to their mutual friends. She was the first to feel the ripple effect of the truth I'd put into motion. I wasn't surprised that Sarah was defensive of Lisa, she always had been. But what she didn't realize was that this wasn't just about the affair. It was about respect, about accountability, and about making sure that Lisa finally faced the consequences of her actions. The call came as I was sitting in my office, and I let it ring a few times before answering. "Grant, what the hell is going on?" Sarah's voice was tight with anger. "Lisa's been trying to reach you, and we need to talk about this." I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tracing the edge of the desk. "I'm sure Lisa has been trying to reach me. That's what happens when someone's life starts to unravel. But we're not talking about this, Sarah. I'm talking to Lisa. And I'm doing what needs to be done." She scoffed. "What, you think exposing her like this is going to help anything? She made a mistake. You don't have to destroy her over it." I took a breath, letting the frustration of the situation slide off my shoulders. "It's not about the mistake, Sarah. It's about the years of lying, the years of hiding things from me, and the complete disregard for the vows she made. She thought she could get away with it. And now, she's going to learn that there are consequences for that kind of betrayal." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Sarah spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "I get it, Grant. I really do. But this isn't just about you. You're dragging everyone into this. Everyone who's ever supported Lisa." I shook my head, almost pitying her for not seeing the bigger picture. The only person who dragged anyone into this was Lisa. Not me. I'm not the one who decided to destroy my family. She did that on her own. The conversation ended abruptly, and for the first time in days, there was a brief silence. But I knew it wouldn't last. Lisa's friends, her family, everyone who had backed her for so long, were going to turn on her. And I was going to make sure they knew the truth, every last detail. They weren't going to get away with pretending like everything was fine. Not anymore. Later that day, Lisa came home to a house that felt different. I had already made the necessary arrangements with our lawyer, and I had no intention of backing down. When she walked in, I was sitting in the living room, the papers in front of me. She looked exhausted, the weight of everything starting to show in her eyes. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't the man who was going to pick up the pieces for her this time. "Grant, please," she started, her voice weak, pleading. "Please, just let me explain." I didn't respond immediately. I let her stand there, looking broken, while I silently sorted through the documents in front of me. The truth had been exposed, and it was time to finalize everything. Her world was crashing down, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Explain what, Lisa?" I said finally, my voice unwavering. "There's nothing left to explain. You made your choices. And now, you're going to live with the consequences." Her eyes searched mine, but there was no softness left in them. I had nothing more to give her. "You can't do this," she whispered. "Please. This is going too far. It's not just me you're hurting. Think about the kids. Think about everything we built together. I stood up, walking slowly toward her. I've thought about everything, Lisa. And I've thought about the kids. That's why I'm doing this. Because you've already shown them what it looks like to lie, to betray the person you're supposed to trust the most. And I won't let that kind of behavior stand. They deserve better than that. The silence in the room was deafening. She reached out for me, her hand trembling. Grant, please don't do this. I'll make it right. I swear. Just, don't take everything from me. I took her hand, holding it for a moment, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw the woman I had once loved. But then I let go. There was nothing left for me to hold on to. You had your chance, Lisa, I said softly, but firmly. And now it's too late. With that, I walked out of the room. I had made my peace with everything. She had crossed the line, and now, she was going to face the consequences. The life we had built was over, but mine was just beginning again. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-respect, and my future. The fallout would come. People would turn their backs on Lisa. Her reputation would be shattered. And as for me, I would stand tall. I had learned a valuable lesson through all of this. I wasn't the one who had to apologize. I wasn't the one who had to regret. That was Lisa's burden now. And when the dust finally settled, would be the one left standing, free from the lies, free from the betrayal. And I would build something stronger this time, something that couldn't be torn apart so easily.